Today we're diving into something that's, honestly, a kind of statistical art form. It's called graduation, and it's all about one thing: finding the true, clear signal that's hiding inside a whole mountain of messy, noisy data. So let's get into it. All right, just look at this. It's a scatter plot of raw data points. It is all over the place, right? It's chaotic. Now imagine your entire job, depends on predicting what happens next. Where would you even start? How do you find a reliable trend in all of that? Well, that's the big question we're here to answer. And to make this really concrete, here's a perfect example. This is raw mortality data. Every single dot is a real observed death rate for a given age. But look how much they jump around. It's totally erratic. If you try to use this crude data to set something important, like life insurance premiums, you'd end up with madness. Prices would leap up one year and then plummet the next. It's a massive financial risk. And that right there is the fundamental problem with raw data. It's just too volatile, too full of random blips and fluctuations, what statisticians call noise, to be useful for making stable, long-term decisions. That noise can completely hide the actual pattern you're trying to find. And that's exactly where graduation comes in. Now, this isn't just about playing connect the dots. Oh no, it is a really sophisticated process of smoothing out all that noise to finally reveal the true signal buried underneath. The whole point is to turn that chaotic cloud of data points into a clean, predictable, and, most importantly, a usable curve.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Graduation isn't just some cold mathematical formula. It is a balancing act. It's this constant push and pull between two competing goals, sticking as close as you can to the data you actually saw and creating a final result that is perfectly smooth and logical. Nailing that balance, that's everything.
So let's break that down. On one side, you've got adherence, or what's sometimes called goodness of fit. This means you want your new smoothed out curve to hug the original data points as tightly as possible. You have to respect the facts, right? But if you take that too far, you just end up with a jagged line that's almost as useless as the raw data itself. Then on the other side, you have smoothness. This is all about making sure the final rates make sense, that they progress logically without any weird sudden jumps. But if you make your line too smooth, you risk ironing out important real-world details that were in the data for a reason. It's a real dilemma. And which side you lean towards really depends on the job at hand. For instance, if you're building a massive, official mortality table for an entire country, you're going to lean towards adherence. Accuracy is king there. You need the truest possible reflection of reality. But if you're an insurance company setting premiums, you're going to prioritize smoothness. Why? Because you can't have the price for a 41-year-old be wildly different from a 40-year-old. It just wouldn't work. Consistency is what matters most.
So how do actuaries and statisticians actually pull off this delicate balancing act? Well, they've got a toolkit with 3 main methods, and it helps to think of them as 3 very different tools, each one built for a specific kind of job. First up, we've got the heavy-duty power tool, the parametric formula. This is where you pick a single, powerful mathematical equation, like the famous Gompertz or Makeham laws, which were developed over a century ago to model how mortality risk grows with age, and you use a computer to find the perfect version of that formula that best fits your data. The huge advantage here is that you get an incredibly smooth, objective result. It's perfect for those big, serious jobs like creating a new national mortality table. But here's the catch. Human life is complicated. It's really, really hard to find one single equation that perfectly describes mortality for a newborn and a 100-year-old. So this method can sometimes struggle at the extreme ends of the age spectrum. Okay, tool number 2 is a totally different approach: graduating by reference to a standard table. You can think of this like using a professionally designed template. You take a high-quality, trusted mortality table that's already out there, and you just tweak it a little bit so it better matches your own, often smaller, set of data. You're basically borrowing its shape. Now, this is a fantastic method when you don't have a ton of your own data, because you're using the solid foundation of the standard table to fill in your gaps. It's a quick way to get usable rates, but, and this is a huge but, it comes with a major risk. If you pick the wrong template, a table that doesn't really match your group's experience, your results are going to be fundamentally wrong. You'll have basically forced your data into a shape it doesn't belong in. And that brings us to our third and most flexible tool: spline functions. Honestly, this method is pretty brilliant.
Instead of trying to force one single formula on the entire dataset, splines stitch together a series of smaller, simpler functions. These little pieces connect perfectly at points called knots, and the result is a curve that can bend and flex to follow the data wherever it needs to go.
And this is where you really see the magic of splines. Check out this slide. That smooth blue line was made with a spline. See how it's not just smooth, but it's also flexible enough to actually capture that weird little spike in the raw data? That's a real-world feature known as the accident hump, which reflects higher mortality for young men. A more rigid parametric formula would have probably just smoothed right over that crucial detail.
So the big pro here is obviously that incredible flexibility. Splines can follow the unique twists and turns of just about any dataset. But the flip side is that this method requires a lot more human judgment. Deciding how many knots to use and exactly where to place them, that's more of an art. It takes experience and a lot of trial and error to really get it right.
Okay, so we have our 3 tools in the toolkit: the power tool formula, the reliable template, and the flexible spline. So how do you know which one to pick for the job? Well, let's look at a couple of clear-cut scenarios. Imagine you're an actuary for, let's say, a medium-sized pension scheme. You probably have some of your own data, but maybe not enough to be really solid on its own. Your best bet? You're going to reference a standard table. But now, picture yourself as a government statistician with a gigantic dataset for an entire country. Now you have the raw material to build something totally new from scratch. In that case, you'd reach for a powerful parametric formula or a highly flexible spline.
At this point, you might be thinking, okay, this is all pretty technical, kind of niche stuff. But the truth is, the consequences of getting graduation right or wrong are absolutely enormous, and they affect millions and millions of us.
So why does this matter so much? Because this whole process is the bedrock of our financial and social infrastructure. It's what allows insurance companies to set fair prices. It's what helps ensure a pension fund can actually keep its promises to people in retirement. And it's what lets governments make smart long-term plans for huge systems like Social Security and public health. A bad graduation can lead to financial instability and flawed public policy. The stakes, well, they really couldn't be higher. And that leaves us with this one last thought to chew on. You know, we live in this age of so-called big data, where the mantra is often just to trust the raw numbers. But what graduation teaches us is that sometimes the raw numbers are more noise than they are signal. And the real art, the real challenge, is finding that perfect balance, knowing when to follow the data to the letter and when we need to smooth it out just enough to tell a clearer, more powerful, and ultimately a more useful story.